Hello and welcome to RE A Dread. Today we really are addressing a dread that I feel because I've been thinking about my role in society as a professional reader, and I've just been kind of lamenting the fact that people don't read as much anymore. That nowadays, because there's oodles of distractions like YouTube videos, people find it really hard to just actually find the time to sit down and consume books. And so I figured what I would do is I would just do a survey of my life, my sort of schedule, and just share some tips on how I was able to find time to work in and integrate reading into my life such that I am able to, read and consume quite a vast number of books. And so most people, of course, are reading, your single to double digit books every year. I'd be surprised if there was anyone who wasn't reading like 50 to 60 books a year. But with these tips, I'm kind of hoping to bump you up into the triple and, depending on how committed you are, up into the quadruple digits in terms of books that you can consume within a calendar year. So I have 5 tips in mind. Some of them are going to be ones that you've heard before, but I'm going to repeat them with just the most minute alterations to the phrasing, because realistically that's what a lot of the motivational speak is. It's just saying the exact same truisms, but just trying to find new ways of saying it, new syntactical or emphatic ways, hoping that it clicks in your head. And so this is going to be my attempt to do that as well. But I also have a couple of new or novel ones, pardon the pun, that I don't think people talk about as often. But yeah, let's get started. I'm going to talk about 5 tips that will help you consume more books. The first one that I don't hear people talk about as often, is to get a job at which you can read. Now, of course, bonus points are if your job is reading. If you're a reviewer or if you write like blogs or journals or something about books, then that's awesome because you have the benefit of being able to say, I work a full-time job and I was still able to read 100 books a year. Why doesn't everybody who has a full-time job read 100 books per year? And so you're able to kind of give this advice to the vast range of people who are workers and are in the working class, and you can essentially make them feel bad for not being able to read as much as you, even though reading is a part of your job. Maybe reading's not part of the job exactly, but you work a job that is sort of so low maintenance or so easy to do that you're able to read in downtime. And this is something that I've experienced as well. I used to work at an escape room. And so for those of you who don't know, the formula of an escape room is that you take people, you lock them in a room, there are puzzles in that room, they have about an hour to solve the puzzles, and then they go on. Of course, if you're a good game master, you're watching them, you're paying attention, and you're kind of giving clues and helping them out as they go through. However, of course, an entrepreneur and a visionary in the art of consuming books, I essentially saw it as uninterrupted hours of being able to read. And so while people were in the room struggling to find puzzles that had rubbed out, even though I didn't notice it and didn't reset the room properly, I was just smashing through book after book. And so that was another great example where I was able to say, yeah, look, I can read like 4 books a week and I'm working the whole time, so there's really no excuse. If you're struggling to find time to read, then that's my first tip, is just change your job or change your career path such that you're able to work and read at the same time. Okay, the next step, I know that this is one that's been mentioned before, but I just want to make an argument or a case for it, is listening to audiobooks, and specifically listening to audiobooks at faster than 1 times speed. So, as we know, listening is faster than reading. You can listen to these words that I'm lecturing you on faster than you could possibly read them, because with a sound, you're just capturing the sound in one go, but with books and with reading, you have to look at each letter one at a time, and if it's a long curvy letter like G, you've got to trace the whole thing, and that's basically the time it takes to hear a whole word. So audiobooks are the way to go. It's the superior form of consuming information, and I'll give you an example or to kind of try to preach the gospel of listening to audiobooks at a faster speed. Here I have an audiobook of Ulysses by James Joyce, and we'll just play an example of it.
Cursed Jesuit strain in you, only it's injected the wrong way. To me it's all a mockery and beastly. Her cerebral lobes are not functioning.
Right. However, I want to make an argument. Ulysses, written by the famous Irish writer James Joyce, is, of course, a book about Ireland. And so if I set the playback speed to 3 times, now I want you to listen and to see if the atmosphere is coming across. So as you can hear, now that we've set the audiobook to 3 times speed, it just sounds like Irish people talking. And so we've actually stumbled across and found a more idiomatic and appropriate way of listening to Ulysses by James Joyce, rather than the normal 1 times speed. And so this is why listening to audiobooks, especially at faster than 1 times speed, can be a valuable way of consuming a product. And before I move on, I just really want to fixate on that idea, like the consuming a product, because I want people to know that we live in a world, in a capitalistic structure world, where an artist creates a product like a book or an audio book for you to consume, and we exchange finances for that product. Once the exchange has occurred, the producer of the product has won. They've gotten everything out of you that they could possibly ever want from you, and so the relationship between the two of you doesn't matter anymore. And that might seem disheartening, but what it really means is that now you are completely and fully entitled to interact with the artwork in whatever way you want. You know, you spent your hard-earned money reading at work instead of working on this piece of art, and so you're able to listen to it at 3 times speed if you want. You're able to maybe just read the first sentence of every paragraph rather than reading every paragraph. You're entitled to just read the dialogue and skip anything that's not surrounded by quotation marks. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to preach that once money has been exchanged, there's no obligation that you have to the artist to engage with the work in any way that doesn't suit you. And even with, this video, if you're this far in, then I don't really even care about you anymore, because I've already gotten the couple of cents from you watching the ad at the start of the video. So I don't even know why you're still here. And if you're not watching this video on at least 1.5 speed, like, come on, have I taught you anything? Okay, next up, if these techniques haven't really been to your liking, then something I recommend is to read books that are easy to understand. You can do this by either choosing children's literature. Some examples would be either The Little Prince or Justine. However, there's another way or another method for making books easier to read that I think is underrated and no one's really explored or talked about before. And that is actually what I've done here. So this enigmatic sheet of 4 pieces of paper is the first chapter of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, a very popular book. It's making the rounds on the booktube /talk/ etc., Bookstagram, of course. However, what I've decided to do is to take the text from the first chapter, put it into a program that alphabetizes every character, and so what I've got is, instead of sentences that you might need to sort of read like it being a hot day in St. Petersburg, now the first chapter is actually just arranged in alphabetical order of all the letters. So as you can imagine, this is the easiest thing imaginable to read. All you have to do to really get a grasp or understanding of the first chapter of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment is just to realize that you know, after we get through all the exclamation marks and full stops, we've got some capital letters, but then we get into the real meat of the chapter, which is just a bunch of the letters A, some but not as many of B's and C's. As you can expect, we've got a bajillion E's, of course, and you know, we even get to the very end where we've got some question mark characters that the program I used couldn't figure out what those characters were. So in a matter of a couple of seconds, I was able to go through and read the first chapter of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment because of this really useful method. So yeah, you want to read books that are easy to understand, and if books aren't easy to understand, then you want to just make them easy to understand. Okay, my fourth piece of advice is to emancipate yourself from the false hierarchy that is book binding. And what I mean by that is simply this. We've become conditioned to think that a book looks like this. It's got a front, it's got a back, and it's got pages. However, I want to bring an example to you of a book like this, The Greek Plays, which he certainly is. This is a collection of 16 plays from ancient Greek playwrights, and last night I went through and read one of them by Aeschylus. It was Persians, and I realized that that was one play, that was one book, and so I was able to tick that off as one book that I'd read, even though it was only a part or a fraction of this book. And this is a very common thing because I know in my heart that there exists somewhere out in the world a version of the book that is just that play, just Persians. And so what I did was I pretended that I'd read that instead of reading this. And that was really helpful because now, by the time I get to the end of what normal people or what conditioned people would call this one book, I'll have actually read 16 books and be 16 times better than anybody else. And you can take that even further once you realize that a book can be just a handheld, consumable chunk of information. Then what I actually recommend as an even faster or an even more streamlined method of reading is to go through to find the book and maybe find a chapter or a page, maybe just a single page that you want, and rip it out. And then what you can do is fold it like this. I'm going to show you, this is a pretty cutting edge technique, but now that we've got our consumable bit of information, I'm going to fold it in half long ways like this. Bingo. Now I'm going to start making some cuts. I'm going to go firstly in the middle, and I'm cutting along the open side, making sure to not cut the binding or the spine of the book here, and then I'll put some cuts, hopefully try to get it as even as possible throughout. Boom, boom. So now what I've got is this kind of book centipede, and I'm going to fold this over like this, 1, 2, 3. Finally, fold this one more time. And what you'll find is that I've actually created a little book. This is a little book that you can flick through and you can read it one page at a time, and then by the time you're done, congratulations, you've read a book. And so that's a pretty new method that I recommend that I haven't seen many people talk about, which is to actually just create books from bits and bobs of books such that you get the positive reinforcements of being able to go through and read many books at a time. If the book that you want to do this to is 500 pages, well, you know, that's actually just an old-fashioned way of thinking about it. Really, you've got a 500 book. And one last tip, let's say you're just so strapped for time that you don't even have the time to flick through this after you've gone through the effort of creating it, then what you can do is you can just eat this. I actually recommend that you just literally consume it, because once you've kind of let it congealed and become part of your saliva, and it enters to your digestive system and your excretory system, once the ink has sort of seeped into your system, then what you're going to realize is that in this kind of process of consuming osmosis, you're going to actually know exactly what is on the pages of this book. So worst case scenario, really you can just eat the books that you want to read, and you can chop them up and make them part of a salad or something. You can what I call passive reading. It's just sort of reading without even realizing that you're reading. That's an expert level tip. I wouldn't really recommend doing that unless you're kind of really committed to making literature a part of you. Okay, and the lucky last piece of advice that I want to give for how to consume more books is just lie about it. And this is a really underrated piece of advice. Not underrated in that I don't think people do it. I think people are doing it all the time, but underrated in that people aren't really open to talking about it. And I really just want to spread the gospel of distruth, because as I mentioned, we're in this relationship where there is a kind of consumer provider product that is being made, and we've already explored how that works with you buying books and buying pieces of art. But if you, like me, are in a position where you can financially benefit from having read a lot of books, well, the obvious elephant in the room is that the product people are consuming when you say that you've read a lot of books is not the fact that you've read a lot of books or the record of you having read a lot of books. It's simply the uttered words of you saying that you've read a lot of books. And once you've freed yourself from that earlier conventional way of thinking, well, the sky's the limit. Why don't you just say that you've read a book, skip the whole process, and then you'll be exactly in the same position that you would be if you had read the book, except that it's happened a lot earlier, and you're then able to create the product that is you talking about having consumed a lot of books in, a tenth the time. And this happens all the time. Avicenna famously said that he had to read Aristotle's Metaphysics 40 times before he understood it, but we kind of all know, just listening to that that's untrue. Obviously, he just grabbed Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy and read the chapter on Aristotle to understand it. And lying is actually more fundamentally a part of our everyday life than we give it credit for. For example, let's say I wake up in the morning and I go into the bathroom, I'm, doing miscellaneous bathroom things, and then I come out and I see my housemate and he says, "Hey, how are you going?" I sort of have one of two options. I can either say, "Hey, I've just spent 15 minutes ridden with anxiety, staring at the mirror because I'm worried that my eyebrows make me look like Jafar from Aladdin," or I can say to him, "I'm good." And I don't know about you, but I know what I say all of the time, every day, because the most important thing we can do when we're interacting with people is to make sure that every impression that we give off is a positive one. If you have the choice, it is always better to give off a positive impression than a genuine one. And so I recommend just integrating this overall macro philosophy into your life of everything being good all the time. You have read the books. You have mastered that language on Duolingo. You are fine. And the reason that this is also important is because the other person with whom you're interfacing, they have their own complex web of emotions that they're working through. And to be honest, they don't really have time to consider any version of you except the most perfect. And so it's actually kind of presumptuous of you to assume that anybody wants any nuanced perspective of you other than the most perfect, beautiful, picturesque. And so with that in mind, I hope that you take my pieces of advice to heart. I hope that you read more books and do your part in society to just make the world a better place. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.